So Dominic is going to show us the light painting process behind this photo, and there are a lot of tips and tricks in between. What is going on YouTube? My name is Mo and I'm a car photographer from Bahrain. If you'd like to learn all about car photography and Photoshop, go ahead and subscribe now so you don't miss out on all the cool stuff that I create every week. So, another awesome collaboration, this time with Dominic from the UK, though he is somewhere in the US, this guy. Now, if you're not familiar with Dominic and his amazing work, head out to his Instagram account. Now, I really do enjoy watching his feed. However, his stories can be really hilarious sometimes. Go ahead, I'll leave a link to his Instagram account in the description below. Now, enough talking, I'll hand it over to Dominic.
Hello, just a short intro. My name is Dominic. I'm an automotive photographer and I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. As you can tell, originally from the UK, I moved here about 3 years ago. And yeah, I'll show you this Ford Torino King Cobra. It's a 1970, it's one of two prototypes that were built during the NASCAR Aero Wars. So it's a pretty cool car. So I'm going to take this image here, or this is one of the images, to get to this. And hopefully this rundown will give you some insight into how I've done that. And firstly, obviously, I'll start in bridge. I do some minor adjustments. These are already slightly adjusted just to things like matching the temperature, a bit of contrast, highlights, shadows. I hadn't done a great amount of adjustments in here. I personally find when I'm doing light painting, I don't do too many adjustments in RAW, and then I do most of those in Photoshop. But these were the files that I'd started with. It was lit in the studio. I've got a Nikon or Nikon, depending on where you are, D800, and this was lit with a Light Panels Astra light panel. It's not an ideal thing to use. I also use a Westcott Ice Light, which I love, but the battery's getting on a bit and it's struggling to stay at full power. So these are the files that I'd started with. There were a bunch that I didn't end up using, and I will show you the ones that I did use. So, started off here. It's already placed for the background that I've chosen for the image. Now, normally with composite or composite, again, depending on where you are in the world, normally I tend to try and find the background beforehand, because that gives me a bit more of an insight into how I'm going to shoot the vehicle, camera height, focal length, that kind of thing. This instance, I didn't really get a chance to do that. I was on a bit of a tight time schedule, so I just went ahead and shot it. But I was fortunate enough to find one that seemed to fit really well. Okay, so the car is here, and these are all of my light painted shots, and I'll gradually introduce those, slowly introducing light onto the vehicle in the places that I'll need. It may start to look a bit odd, but this was one of the base layers that I'd used, and gradually start introducing those shots there. Now, the majority of these are set to lighten, and I've just used a mask to bring out the areas that I need to bring out. I noticed with the polarizer, I was getting a lot of this flooring. I didn't want that there, so I'd managed to get a shot like that. However, it was too bright for what I'd wanted, so I eventually brought the brightness down on it, then just brought the back end up a touch. Then obviously onto the wheels. And I don't worry too much about masking it right now. For me, I find I just get straight in, get the car lit and illuminated how I want it, and then I'll worry about the masking after that, which I have done in this case, as you'll see here. And the mask for that just looks like that. Just a side note for anyone doing this kind of thing. Somebody once pointed out to me that an edge is never ever a perfect edge when you're shooting photography, a real life object. Unless you're working in sort of 3ds Max or 3D rendering, that kind of thing, or design. The edge is always, between 1, 2 or 3 pixels wide. So just a light feather. I tend to find that 0.8 seems to be my magic number. I don't know why. And so when that's introduced, it's not quite perfect here, and I did go and adjust it. But yeah, you always want a slight feather there just to help soften that edge, because it's never going to be completely sharp. Right, once the mask's done, I then started looking at placing that on a background, and I found this background on Adobe stock, which I really, really liked, and it fits the overall look that I was looking for, which I'd done with a different image. I can show you that one quickly. Yeah, the other image looked a little bit like this. So I wanted that concrete kind of looking industrial feel to it. Right. Obviously that's way too bright for what I'm looking for, so I started looking at bringing down the brightness on there, and there was a touch of yellow in it, so I wanted to try and take that out again, more to match the photo that I'd already done. So I took the yellow out. You can't really see much of a difference there, and then again just adjusted the brightness and the contrast of that using a curves adjustment layer. Once that was placed in, I find it very difficult for me to really get a good feel for a vehicle's placement without a shadow. Without the shadow there, it always looks fake. So one of my things that I recommend is try and introduce the shadow early on, so that you can really nail that and help get that looking more realistic. Just that shadow alone makes a massive difference. I'll show you the masking for that. This was just a very basic shape, and I just touched it up a little bit with masks and gradually faded it out towards the back end around here, to the sides, and then a little bit to the front. Another thing that I also like to do, I've just kind of figured this out, but certainly in this with the concrete, having that more sort of mottled effect, I like to do one of these little masks on the edges. Now this was, I'll show you, here we go, it was one of these, I think it was this one here, Airbrush Soft Low Density Grainy, and that grain just gives you this very faint, I think flow was like 2%, 3%, and it just gives you a very faint grain on that, which got a huge difference, but just enough I think to help soften that edge and give it a bit more of a realism with that kind of mottled look. And I think I adjusted the feather on that one and the density as well there. So once I was happy with that, I actually went ahead and I merged all the layers for the car. That's not something I always tend to do, but in this case I had done. I also cut the windows out and did that, and I just tweaked the placement. So if I get rid of that, you can see it. I just tweaked the placement just a hair so that it was more accurately placed in the image on the background. I also went ahead and put a layer mask on there to do the windows. Again, this is one thing, a habit of mine, where I tend to leave the windows. Hue and saturation, I just adjusted. I've got a little bit of a red glow here. There was some, I think that's probably, I don't know, paint from one of the layers. And also the lettering on the tyres was a little too yellow. They are old tyres, so I'd adjusted that. Was that for that one? Nope, that was that there. This hue and saturation layer, I'm not entirely sure what this was doing at all. Oh, that was the reds here. There you go, got rid of that. Got there in the end, sorry. This one I think is an empty layer, so ignore that. Oh, that was the start of my dodge and burn, which I'd done here. Now I noticed that the back was just a little bit lighter than I'd wanted, so I brought that down. I brought the chrome in the rear bumper up, And then I tried to help define the line on the side just here, just a little bit extra. And also, just another side note here, everything that I'm showing you, I think pretty much everything that I'm showing you in here is covered somewhere in one of Mo's tutorials, and again, they've been a huge help to me, so definitely go and check those out. The front end was slightly darker than I'd wanted. I didn't have a layer that was brighter, unfortunately. I think because the studio that I work in is fairly tight in that back corner, so I couldn't quite get the light how I wanted, but a little curves adjustment brought that up to match it with the background a little better. And then I also wanted to add a number plate, so I'd managed to find just a little NASCAR logo, and then I adjusted this a little bit just to try and get that set in there nicely. Then I was pretty happy with where it was at that moment, so I didn't do a huge amount of adjustments. I added a little blue down here. Sorry, I forgot to add that. I added some blue to the background early on. I think I just adjusted it slightly here as well with this selective color layer. This was simply adjusting the blacks, adding some blues there. And again, looking back at the other image that I'd shot, it had a slightly darker vignette around it, so I wanted to bring some more of that in here. And then once I was done there, I was overall pretty happy with that. There is something missing. The windows, here we go. So I added the windows. After I'd cut the windows out, obviously it was too bright. There's always some darkness there. There's often a greenish tint, but I didn't really notice it with this vehicle, so I just went ahead, I think with like almost like a browny black, and then just gently introduce that into that. And then obviously the back one there was slightly darker in person, so I darkened that a touch as well. And for that literally looks like this. So, and then the final thing that I'd done, again, this was something that I think Mo had shown me in one of his tutorials. Yes, it was, yep. Was just bringing out some of these details to sharpening them up just a touch, which I'd done here. And you can see a very, very faint, subtle difference, but it makes a difference. And overall, I think that's about it. Man, after I tidied it up, it looked pretty simple. But yeah, with regards to I'm just trying to think of anything else that's worth covering. Like I say, I always try and shoot the car for the background when I'm doing these shots, just because it does make things a ton easier. But then it doesn't always work out. Adobe Stock's got a ton of decent images for you to use as well, so definitely check it out.
See, I told you there are a lot of amazing tips and tricks within the video. Now, if you have any questions to Dominic or myself, please leave us a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow Dominic and myself on Instagram. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.